Last week, after I finished preaching, some of you responded, amen. I don't know if today, after the reading, you will, because you might be guessing that I'll be talking about money and giving to the collection. And you are right. The readings today speak to us about faith. But first, we need to understand the relationship in the gospel between the Pharisees giving and the poor widow. The Pharisees and the scribes, because they were teaching the law, they were held a high esteem. But they used their power to fill their pockets. They loved to be honored and given the best places. And everything they did was around themselves, to the point that they forgot that everything comes from God. Everything. The widow, on the other hand, according to the law, was supposed to be supported and maintained by the temple, kind of like a social security check. But there she is, giving to the temple everything that she has. Here is the act of faith. Just like the widow with the prophet Elijah, who gave up the food that she was going to consume with her child so the prophet will eat. She did it in faith. Faith that God will provide. And he did. For a whole year, there was enough food for the three of them. This widow in the gospel is giving everything she has in faith that God will provide. You see, God knows us very, very well. And he knows our hearts. Because he himself took the flesh of man and lived among us and experienced death. But he also experienced poverty and going hungry and being tired. The advantage is ours because God truly knows us. And he knows what we need. And he knows our heart. This is why, even though when the wealthy were given of their surplus, it was a lot of money. Enough to do more works. The widow was only given 2 pennies. Nowadays, you can't buy anything with 2 pennies. But the Lord said she gave more because she gave everything she had. Because the Lord knows our heart. He knows our intentions. And he knows when our gift is sacrificial or not. To live the gospel, there are 2 options. One, we resign to everything we have and we all become monks and nuns. But unfortunately, that's not how we all live. Most of us are also called to a marriage life. And you can't just give everything away because you have people to support. The businessman cannot squander or throw or give everything away because they have employees that depend on them. And so you have families that depend on what you make. The thing is that we need to become better stewards of what we have, of what the Lord is giving us. Not to become like the Pharisees, but to be like the widow who trusts fully in God. Most of you have a job, and you trust in God that you have a job this week. And you trust in God that you'll have a job next week. And in this trust and faith, the least we can do is give God the first fruits. Now, automatically, you will be thinking 10%, that's a lot of money. I want you to think it another way. If you work 40 hours a week, your first fruits are your first 4 hours of work. If you work 30 hours a week, your first fruits are the first 3 hours. If you work 20 hours a week, your first fruits are the first 2 hours. Now you might still be thinking, good Lord, that's a lot of money still. But just imagine if out of love you will give, or you'll start giving your first hour, the first fruit, the first hour of work to the church. That's it. At least to get started. Let me remind you that God asks us to care for the poor and also to care for the church. Not because God needs us. He can take care of the poor himself. What God is doing is teaching us not to get attached to the things of this world. Not to depend so much in materialism. Because let me tell you what happened when we get so attached to money. We start treating the church as if this was a Walmart. As if we were doing business transactions with the sacraments. And that is not what we are about. Not at all. Sometimes we have parents dropping their kids for faith formation, and because they pay for the books and the materials, they assume that they can clean their hands and it's just our business, just like they do with schools. It's not like that. We're not doing business transactions here. We are evangelizing. We're caring for souls. To be good stewards, we need to develop 3 virtues. The first one is modesty. We need to stop being so showy of what we have. Making others feel uncomfortable to be even around you. We don't need to be disclaiming how much money we have and how much I have. That's unnecessary. After all, you're not taking anything to heaven with you, assuming we go to heaven. We need to develop the virtue of temperance. Learn to control our appetites. Otherwise, money is going to be the means to addictions, to unorganized pleasures, to killing the soul. And finally, generosity. To be able to give sacrificially. Give so that we don't get attached to the things of this world. Give out of love for the poor in the church. Pharisees and the scribes are harshly described in the Gospels. And with right reason. Let's be careful not to turn into them, but the contrary, that in humility we are like the widow, that we are trusting in God first, that we place our faith in God first, and He will provide.